was taken by the view like we were in Paris.
The 16th means something in French. Not necessarily a good thing, not necessarily a bad thing. Google says it's swanky. What does that word mean? I suppose it's cute that Google's using British English, slightly slang words, but they don't really know what it means. The 16th arrondissement of Paris isn't really swanky. Swanky is ostentatious. It's pretentious, it's swagger. Yes, it's stylish, perhaps it's fashionable, perhaps luxurious. Do people strut and swagger in an ostentatious, show-offy way in the 16th arrondissement of Paris? No, not really. You just don't see people. Not the people of the 16th. You see their Filipino au pairs.
Et salut. Dis donc toi, je veux que tu m'aimes, mais pas comme ça.
Swanky is a word that's been around since the mid to late 1800s. England. Google are perhaps confusing swanky with elegance and taste. Yes, you can compare it to, but it's the trailer trash version of old money. There's a big extreme there, but it's something a little bit more flash than what you know. Google cultural appropriation of English language. Let's face it, all American, everything you see in the film and movies, it's trailer trash compared to English. As a British person, you can pick out the English actress, the English actor that adds the quality, the writers even. You can even pick out the language that's used by the writers that adds.
Hey baby, mais retiens-toi, ne m'embrasse pas. Je t'ai dit que tes façons ne me plaisent pas.
The quality. Americans have this love-hate affair with France and
Dans Siezieme, mon beau quartier.
with Paris. But what about the 16th arrondissement?
J'suis considéré.
The 16th arrondissement. I was walking down the street just the other day. I'm not starting a rap, though it is a lyrics quote. And these two, a pair, man and a woman, and then later a third man, handed me these political leaflets, very colourful, red, white and blue with an attractive woman's face, up front and central. F off, I ended up having to say to them after I finally figured out what was going on, because they said the words Le Pen. They were leafleting on the street, people just walking up the very swanky street, with florists and boutiques for interior design ideas. A tree-lined boulevard. They're talking in sound bites. The Le Pen, something from their parents' generation. Le Pen is the raw National Front racist candidate from the past, and they're still using it as an attractive thing. Yes, it's the daughter that's the national candidate, but the 16th arrondissement is the, what do you call it, the grassroots of the movement? It doesn't have to be that. That way, but having your own Filipino au pair or housemaid, or it's a must-have cachet. You're suddenly part of the elitist community, or you're not part of the elitist community. Perhaps the 16th arrondissement is the swankiest of Paris. But
Je crois que c'est le blues et je sens que je vais pleurer.
the word itself gets compared and confused with elegance and taste,
Eh baby, ne m'embrasse pas, les gens nous voient.
which the predominant politics of that area can't.
Oh mon Dieu, là le concierge il va jaser dans 16e.
Be. It's home to foreign embassies and renowned museums, private villas, former country houses, gated communities, and huge area of parkland. Bois de Boulogne.
Mon beau quartier, je suis considéré.
If you've ever seen that series, The Parisian Agency, Boulogne is where their home is. There's the
Ben mon vieux, si tu crois que comme ça, je pourrais t'aimer.
Palais de Charlotte, the Place de Trocadero, and the Arc de Triomphe. Within this arrondissement's extensive delineation, some prestigious schools and large avenues give it much similar feel to Kensington and Chelsea in London, or perhaps Berlin's Charlottenburg. Only Neuilly-sur-Seine and the 7th arrondissement are considered richer districts. Absorbed into Paris in
Sois sérieux, je veux être fier de toi.
1859, there were strings pulled by the wealthy. They were going to be called the 13th arrondissement, but the rich and powerful didn't like the number. Poor old 6 o'clock on the circle got it shunted onto them at Porte
Mais pour cela, il faut être distingué.
Italy. They tend to have a knack of picking the presidents, though. Macron, Sarkozy, Chirac, Giscard d'Estaing. But as well as the
Ben mon vieux, si tu crois que comme ça,
big houses with those very rare gardens, there's lots of small apartments without toilets, sometimes without showers. There's a shared toilet in the building. You go onto a landing, 12 metres squared, 7 metres squared sometimes. An apartment the size of your child's small bedroom, the size of your ensuite perhaps, but not actually appointed with any sort of bathroom facilities. But thousands of these with an Eiffel Tower view. Last Tango.
je pourrais t'aimer.
Last Tango in Paris film was set here.
Sois sérieux, je veux être fier de toi. Mais pour cela, il faut être distingué.
Set here. That's Le Siezieme. Le Siezieme, the 16th. I take Metro Line 9, which runs like a spine through it. You need to know the last station on the line when you're using the Paris Metro. Pont de Sèvres. Franklin de Roosevelt is sort of in the 8th, really. The 8th arrondissement. At its other limit, Metro Line 6 cuts a little arc through the 16th Étoile to Passy. Line 10 is an option for Boulogne St Cloud and the lower part of the arrondissement with the different postcode. 2 postcodes to one area. Yeah. I never go to Pont de Grenelle and the Statue of Liberty. You can get a view with the Eiffel Tower and the Statue of Liberty in the foreground, but the other half has seen the real thing. Gustave Eiffel's aerodynamic laboratory and wind tunnel. Castel Barrage, designed by Hector Guimard, that made those ironwork metro entrances. Place Lamartine has the last operating artesian well in Paris. I like a market. There's one in St Didier. President Wilson, Admiral Breu, the boulevard between Weber and Marbeau. There's a Passé covered market in Place de Passy, and Rue de l'Annonciation near Lamouette has a street market most days. I couldn't help but wonder if the tented stall selling silver cutlery and tableware in the market off Place de Victor Hugo roundabout didn't come from disgruntled au pairs, possibly. But to just pop up out of metro station and have a little look around is really the way to get a feel for this area of the haves and the have-nots. You need to promenade down the boulevards. Oh, look, the Eiffel Tower again. You'll be saying to yourself all day, and it'll take more than a day to see the 16th reasonably well. Trocadero, a good Eiffel Tower view. Find Rue Benjamin Franklin and head southwest to Place de Costa Rica. The pedestal clock's rather good. Take Rue Raid-Noirde. There's a doorway on your left called Rue des Hauts, which if you go through and take the steps down to Rue Charles Dickens, it's a fascinating narrow stairway, alleyway. At the bottom, turn left, à gauche, and walk a few steps to Place Charles Dickens, where you can visit the Musée de Vin. Museum of Wine. I'll do a little list of 16th museums later, but that's the most important one first. Parc de Passy is on the right as you turn onto Rue Charles Dickens. In the park, Eiffel Tower again. Take the wide stairway on your right to Avenue Marcel Proust. Turn left and head southeast to the narrow passageway called Rue Berton, a cobblestone alley that takes you to Maison Balzac, the house of the writer. The stairway on your right will take you back to Raid-Noirde, Rue to l'Annonciation, turn left to the market and then to Rue du Bain, or left to Rue Passy, and walk to La Mouette, a very nice shopping district of Passy.
Je suis sad. Je ne comprends pas pourquoi mon cœur est heureux quand je te vois.
So, as well as the Museum of Wine in the former abbey cellars that make almost a cliff face for you to climb with a staircase outside, there are several other museums in the Siezieme, the 16th. There's the Palais de Tokyo and the Museum of Modern Art, a grand limestone building constructed for the International Exhibition of Arts and Technology in 1937. It might have been better to keep its name as the Palais de Musée d'Art Moderne. Le Pavilion is perhaps the more experimental art space. It's been constantly re-curated. No, I always like a free museum. The MAM, the Musée d'Art Moderne de la Ville de Paris. You can see Picasso's Braque, Calder, Keith Haring, Pierre Bonnard, Modigliani's The Woman with Blue Eyes. But there was a theft. In May 2010, £100 million worth, which was only 3 or 5 paintings, were taken in the heist of the century, after which the museum sulked and closed its doors for years. But that didn't bring back Picasso's Le Pigeon or Petit Pois, Modigliani's Woman with a Fan, or Fernand Léger's Still Life with a Candlestick. The Trocadero, or the Palais de Charlotte, whichever you want to call it, is home to the Musée de la Marine, as well as being a pretty viewing platform with the 2 curved wings stretching out from the central plaza. I have a butcher's at Napoleon III's coronation barge. Nautical and boating stuff, the ships of the Corsairs in model form. There is the Le Corbusier Institute museum thing, but there's also the Cité de l'Architecture et de Patrimoine. Rescued marble columns and reliefs are just one of the types of exhibit. Oh, and big, up close Eiffel Tower view. There's the Aquarium Cinema, the Greenway Museum, the Arts Asiatique National Museum, 7 Millennium, from China, Japan, India, Korea, Afghanistan, Southeast Asia and Central Asia. But the incontournable the must-see, yeah. The incontournable in French, for most of us, is probably the Musée Marmottan Monet. Monet, the Impressionist painter, a small Paris museum, Michel, Monet's son, donated his father's collection in 1966. It opens onto the Jardin de Ranelagh, a small Luxembourg. Tranquil. A nice neighbourhood. The 16th is where a lot of the fancy Parisian hotels are, like the Peninsula, big in the Jazz Age from 1908 to 1930. Even at the Bistrot à la Meurthe, you'll get a feeling of luxury and comfort. Maintains some of the most well-off Parisians in an enclave of narrow streets with some gourmet food shopping, among the best in Paris. But Siezieme is the home to one of the lungs of Paris, the Bois de Boulogne. Chateau Vincennes, to the east, is the other lung. If you're just going for a holiday, you could do much worse than spending your whole holiday just in the 16th. Within and around the 846 hectares of greenery that is the Bois de Boulogne, there are parks within parks. In the north, there since the Second Napoleonic Empire, there's a magnificent rose garden, and there's music festivals at different times in the Parc de Bagatelle and the Pré Catalan, Pré Meadow Prairie, which has an enchanting Shakespeare garden, which becomes one of the loveliest of Paris's open-air theatres every spring. Marie Antoinette once used to come to Jardin de Ranelagh to dance with her friends. After Haussmann has redeveloped it, it's still got a puppet theatre and a merry-go-round and wooden horses, the oldest in Paris, and decorative statues everywhere. But Auteuil is the end in the south that I know best. Created in 1761 during the reign of Louis XV. 5 greenhouses, set around a formal French parterre garden. Rare plants, trees, palm house, and magnificent aviary, very close to, almost part of, Roland Garros tennis tournament. But perhaps this green area is an influence on the Art Nouveau style, beyond the Art Deco fountains of Auteuil, the first to be illuminated in the capital. When I first stumbled across the delightful Art Nouveau fin de siècle Hotel Guimard on the Avenue Mozart, I was immediately struck by how it seemed to be, the facade seemed to be communicating to me something about the family who commissioned it. The main entrance there seems to be the father somehow. There's another tall son stood by his side. It seems like the wife, the projecting stone balcony, is sort of looking away, not too concerned about what they're doing, and looking at the smaller children, the smaller fenestration, the windows, and off down the Rue Mozart. How I'd go about researching the client from this Belle Epoque era, I'm not too sure. To confirm whether those stones of Paris are communicating. The ornate carved oak panelling and painted coffered ceiling of the listed building 300-seat Theatre de Ranelagh, is something to behold when you're heading off towards the Seine River, but I think what most of you will be heading through the 16th to see is the 100-odd works by the painter of the water lilies, Claude Monet, at the same Musée Marmottan Monet. You can see Gauguin's work, Renoir's work, Sisley and Berthe Morisot. But stop in on the writer Balzac's house, find his little hidey hole where he tried to escape his creditors in 1840, it unusually having a front and a back entrance, near the old iron-rich mineral spring in Passy. Being an architect myself, the Molitor building, the Maison La Roche, and the Maison Jeanneret by Le Corbusier, built in the 1920s and 30s, is what I must recommend to you. We started with Le Siezieme is so swanky. Now drop the S, we're off to Frank Gehry's Louis Vitton foundation construction. To the north of Bois de Boulogne, the Jardin d'Acclimatation, close to where the 16th arrondissement joins Neuilly-sur-Seine. I'd say drop the S of swanky because of the sketch, a few strokes of a pen, and then followed by 400 people to implement it. But then that's not all, there's the changes in the law and the corruption. From an initial sketch drawn on the blank page in a notebook to the transparent cloud sitting at the edge of the Jardin d'Acclimatation in the Bois de Boulogne, Frank Gehry constantly sought to design in Paris a magnificent vessel symbolising the cultural calling of France. Frank Gehry, the creator of dreams, he has designed a unique, emblematic and bold building, the Louis Vuitton Foundation claims. They are only to hold on to the property for 55 years and then it goes to the French government. Now you have to hope that it doesn't keep their name. I think it might just be a maintenance issues cost thing, passing it on to the consumer. Frank Gehry did actually visit the site though. He didn't just do the strokes of his pen from California. To reflect our constantly changing world, we wanted to create a building that would evolve according to the time and the light in order to give the impression of something ephemeral and continually changing, says Frank Gehry about his own work. It's all about sails and an iceberg in the middle of parkland and trees, even quite some way from the river. Volume, vitality, sense of movement, yes, wonderful stuff. In what is a fairly small building, it does try to create walks. It is definitely more than the "look at me, I'm an artistic block" that so many French architectural buildings are, rather than incorporating landscape. But more could have been done. You make a contextual response to the site. That is architecture. How different is Frank Gehry's building really, sails and an iceberg in a green park, compared to his binoculars from years ago in California? 7,000 metres squared of usable floor space, 3,850 metres squared of museum space. I'm not sure if the one comes out of the other or not. But the extravagance that is architecture means, especially here, that there is so many, many more metres squared of here very expensive materials and details to form any sort of enclosure of that 7,000 metres squared area, floor area, with walls or roof or anything in between. And what is the cost of this? And what was the real cost of this between 2008 and 2015? You know those fancy entrance canopies that you get as you go into an office building or school? Well, actually lots of buildings have entrance canopies, don't they? Structurally, if that's connected to the building really by anything more than a flashing, because of wind loadings, the calculations get really quite big compared to if it's standing alone, even if it's only a slither between itself and the building. As long as you're not connected, it makes your structural calculations so much easier, and smaller, and the structure less expensive. Frank Gehry's sails look like a structural engineer's wind-loading nightmare to me. But that is part of architecture, to stretch the team. the skills and the processes. How Louis Vitton sales have been going, I don't follow myself, but the number and volume of high-priced luxury handbags and luggage must be fairly limited in profits when you consider the overheads that they've got. They don't ever cut their prices in terms of those sales. In 2008, when they started, costs were projected at 100 million euros. At that exact time, I was being asked to put a projected cost on a similar stage on a school and university college that I'd done previously had given me some indication of where to go for a much bigger metre squared area. £27 million or £32 million was my advice, depending on how politically you need it to be seen and where you think costs might go in the future. In the future, people were doing at cost and below cost prices for construction projects, but then they were being a bit sly sometimes once they were in, but they needed to keep their team going through the global financial crisis. You need the project to get the go-ahead, but you don't really need the scandal to your reputation when it all gets beyond itself. We started with Swanky and the string pulling of Le Siezieme, or we could call it corruption. But the power that the arrondissement can yield has really surpassed itself with the scandal, really, of the Frank Gehry building in the Bois de Boulogne, which is half of the arrondissement. I'm never one that's able to tease you for too long. $900 million was what the budget came to in 2015, after an initial projection of 100 million. Some say that it's been 10 times as much as the initial estimate. I'll say to you, lots of deconstructivist, this is the style of architecture, buildings get designed and win competitions, but not many of them get to be built. Of this type, there are a fair number in the world that have got built. Architecture is often the incorporation of new technology, and this is in the design process as well as the construction process, and materials themselves. This advance of technology fills the history of architecture since, well, Rome's Pantheon, really, where brick was used to make a vast spanning dome, and that Roman concrete stuff, coffered, the squares between the beams going in both directions. There was a 2-storey bowling alley there before, and the building retains the same metre squared area of that, plus the sails. In terms of programme, it was supposed to take a year or two, 2008 until 2009, possibly early 2010. The 1 year ended up closer to 10 years. It's glass from the Grand Palais and the Palmarium in its concept, and so perfectly contextually reasonable. But why the sails and iceberg reference? Perhaps it's a casual throwaway comment that happens like the Gherkin in London. But it's almost like Frank Gehry is confessing to a contractual calamity of the magnitude of global warming. No, my 32 million pound buildings. Yes, some firms would have a team of people, but if you just put in the hours, you can cut out 9 months of all them talking about it within the team. Costs. Coordination costs. According to Gehry's office, more than 400 people contributed design plans, engineering rules and construction constraints to a shared web-hosted 3D digital model, BIM, Building Informational Model, needed for the three-dimensional 1mm accurate 3,600 glass panels and 9,000 concrete panels that form the facade, simulated and then moulded by industrial robots working off the common model. These aren't facilities that are constantly required everywhere in the world. The French are interested in maintaining the skill base of their population. There's a value to it in a socialist country that exports skills and know-how. Studios Architecture was the local architect for the project spearheading the translation the transition from Guerry's schematic design through the construction process in Paris to the building space. Digital space 3D design software adapted from the aviation industry was used. But that's just the start of a number of innovative technological developments. The permissions needed for the digital model, which can be changed in real time if you have the permission, gets quite dictatorial, and it has to be. The glass panels mentioned are laminated glass, each unique and specifically curved to fit the shapes drawn by the architect team. And there's the ductile white fibre reinforced concrete sections. France and America have been dishing out architectural awards to teams of people that put in too much love to the project unpaid. The project was opposed by people that wanted to protect the quiet enjoyment of the Bois de Boulogne, their delight and pleasure. Challenging the land authorisation through the administrative justice, the decision of the Council of Paris for the building permit was cancelled. The project was in trouble in so many ways. To save the museum project, likely the jobs too, and the little factories and the machinery that had to be specially made, all of which could bring in foreign revenue eventually from projects overseas in the future. The city of Paris felt like it had to change its planning regulations concerning land usage, and it did so in 2011, just 3 months after the court ruling. The building permit, the city and the Louis Vitton Foundation received approval to continue work. The Constitutional Council was who the protectors of the Bois de Boulogne of the 16th arrondissement turned to next with all their legal powers and necessary money, by filing a priority issue of constitutionality, targeting the building permit, but the challenge was rejected. It's a small building. The separate Louis Vuitton Foundation doesn't have amazing modern art, and especially not for this much fuss. It's got a Rasquet and a Gilbert and George and a Jeff Koons. The signature swerving shape of those 12 glass sails is architecturally representational of the swerving of the law. What's going to happen in 55 years' time when the maintenance costs of this tiny building compared to London's Isle of Dogs Dome, now known as the O2 Arena, after being sold off for £1, after never really opening, after similar construction and costs scandals. There may be some clues in that lead, but perhaps it's going to be in 55 years' time when it belongs to the French people, against their will. It'll be touted as a modern-day Eiffel Tower in miniature. Be very wary of any non-profit entity of a large or small multinational corporation. For art and culture, Frick, a French anti-corruption group, filed a complaint in court in Paris accusing the Louis Vuitton Foundation of committing fraud and tax evasion in the construction of its museum. It claimed the non-profit branch of the LV conglomerate was able to deduct about 60% of the cost of the museum from its taxes and request tax refunds on some other costs. In all, it was claimed that LV and the foundation received nearly 600 million from the government towards the then 800 million construction costs of the museum. The French government got the case dismissed. But Frick didn't use its small financial resources to bring this case for no reason. And without evidence, what happened to the whistleblowers? Even to get the project started, the Assemblée Nationale had to pass a special law that the foundation was in the national interest and a major work of art for the whole world, which allowed it to proceed. What it must be like for the ego, though, you yourself doodle on a piece of paper sometimes when you're on the phone, perhaps. Obviously it must be on a piece of blank white paper, not the back of an envelope or a desk pad, but to have all that fuss over turning that into something for the world. You are, and that is, made into something of a demigod. Architect and demigod. Thank you to the French news magazine Marianne for bringing the costs and programme problems to us in 2017.
Des classes bien délimitées détendent les gens. Une vague censée militer prétend s'étendre. Descendre, j'aimerais être largué au vol juste pour une descente. Mais plus garde nos liquidités, constate nos lividités face à l'exemple. Allongé au sol, nous c'est debout face au mur. On vient taxer l'air au sol et poser sur. Le temps se fait plus l'envol, c'est descendre. Mon mic c'est ma dignité, ce clip ça ta vérité. Un fil d'agressivité, vite apprécie l'idée, on reste ensemble. Un fil d'agressivité, vite apprécie l'idée, on reste ensemble.